Hello folks, welcome back to DIY guitar making here at Eric Schaefer Guitars. We're going to do Q&A today. First, just some housekeeping. I actually have a lot of housekeeping to talk about because I've been doing a lot of stuff here. In fact, so much that I'm going to have to I don't want to talk about it all at once right here. I'm going to break it up and talk about it during the housekeeping section of a couple Q&As because there's just so much going on. First of all, I just want to remind you guys with the hands-on guitar build workshops, I've updated them so that now you actually have 4 different model options to choose from and 3 soundboard woods and 4 back and side woods. Previously, it was just an OM build and it was the woods that I was using at the time. You didn't really have a choice. So this is a big upgrade. Now there's a lot more optionality to it. If you've taken a class before, this might be a reason to take a class again, because hey, you built the OM the last time. Now we could build you a dreadnought or a parlor or a triple O. So yeah, so those are, you can get an OM, you can get a triple O, you can get a parlor, you can build a dreadnought. All 4 of those. In addition to that, I just recently added a Florentine cutaway and advanced binding purfling course. So that's all one course with 2 very big important topics embedded into it. It's only a 4-day course and we're building a Florentine cutaway soundbox with side purfling, wood ebony binding, and either mother of pearl or abalone purfling along the top and on the rosette. So in this course, you can think of this kind of like a 102 course with the standard guitar build workshop being like a 101. So this is very much like next level stuff, because in this course we are first of all going deep into side bending. We're going to be doing machine bending. I think there will even be a little bit of bending iron, hand bending involved, particularly with the cutaway section of the Florentine cutaway, although I'm not entirely sure yet. We might only do that on the machines. I have to iron out some of the details here. So yes, lots of side bending skills we'll be learning. We'll be doing wood bindings as well, and those require bending. Those will be ebony. We'll be doing pearl rosette making. We will be also, of course, doing pearl and abalone purfling, which is a very involved process. We'll be doing side purfling, and we'll be dealing with all the intricate miters when you're connecting, for example, side purfling down to your end wedge, side purfling to the little strip of binding that you have at the tip of the Florentine cutaway. So that's why I say that this is an advanced binding and purfling class, because of the combination of the mother of pearl / abalone that we're using for the purfling and the side purfling and the wood bindings, all of that coming together to make for a very high level skill set for an acoustic guitar maker. We are also, of course, doing the Florentine cutaway, so we're going to go through the process of making the tip block and altering your neck block to accommodate the sweep of the curve, and then assembling the whole Florentine cutaway soundbox. In addition to that, we'll be doing a lot of the same things that we do in my regular workshops, like brace carving, like kerfing, like radiusing and all that stuff. Anyway, it's a 4-day class, only 2 people in the class, and at the end of the class you end up with a soundbox, not a full completed guitar, because it's a 4-day course, not an 8-day course, with just a sound box with a Florentine cutaway and with all the wood binding and purfling installed. Another thing I have going on is I am processing and cutting up a whole bunch of back and sides out of Wenge. I got a huge amount of Wenge and I am processing that right now. I'm going to show you some of this in a moment because I am also selling the Wenge for dreadnought size back and sides. I'm going to be selling those for $115 a set, $108 a set for OM or triple O or classical. Those all kind of fit onto that size. And for parlors, $100 a set. Okay, so that'll also fit a concert size instrument and a double O, but no larger than that. And I also even have some ukulele sets, which just right off the top of my head here, I'm going to say $80 a set. So I'll be selling those for $80 a set. By the way, these prices, I checked them except for the ukulele thing going off the top of my head. But all the other ones, I sort of shopped them around, and these are very, very inexpensive sets. If you look around, you will see that Wenge sets of a comparable size go for about $125 to $150 a set. So this is a good deal, seriously. All right, so here's just one set right here as an example. You can see the Bookmatched there. These are unsanded, I'll have you know. So that's why this looks a little rough on this side. If I flip it over, it's a little smoother over here. But they will have the tooling marks. Here's a side set. So I call these Wenge grade instead of, you know, I could say they're AAA grade, and they are. But basically, Wenge is so consistent. Here, we'll look over here. Wenge is extremely consistent to the point where I'm not going to be putting up individual pictures of each set because there's really no reason to. They all essentially look the same. Once you've seen one set of this Wenge, you have kind of seen them all, okay? The other thing, I have a bunch of bridge blanks I'm going to be cutting up. Here, I've got one over here just to show you. So this is a bridge blank. And I'm also going to be selling those for $10 each individually if you want to buy a single bridge blank, or $44 for 5 of them, or if you want to go big and get 10 bridge blanks, I'll sell that for $80. Okay, 10 bridge blanks for $80. Let me just talk about Wenge now for a second. So I freaking love Wenge. Wenge really is, Irvin Samaji at one point in like 2013 or so, put out an article describing it as sort of like the new Brazilian rosewood. Nothing new about it, but simply, you know, people are always searching for alternatives here. And it really has a similar brittleness, which is really just, you think of brittleness as like this glass-like quality, which is what we want. It's a little bit of a liability in a sense because it makes the materials more fragile and prone to splitting, but tonally, that's really the characteristic that we're actually after, is brittleness. And this wood, Wenge, is exceptional tonally. It really is a very, very cheap Brazilian rosewood. If you're interested in the Wenge at all, just send me an email with what you want. You know, you can say I want an OM set and 5 bridge blanks, for example, and then give me your address, and I will send you a PayPal invoice. You pay the invoice, the stuff is on its way. Simple as that. Has to be a USA address, by the way. Sorry, guys. I just can't deal with international stuff right now. I'm not set up for it. Okay, so that's the Wenge. One other small thing I will say is we'll be starting a new sort of segment in these Q&As, and that's called the Tool of the Week. So I will show you a tool. I will talk about a tool. It will be a tool that I have been using for a while. This is not, I'm not going to be pulling any fresh tools out of packaging and unboxing them, because unboxing videos are, quite frankly, moronic. I truly don't understand the purpose of an unboxing video. When I want to hear a review of a product, I want it to be something that the person has used for hopefully months, if not years, not something they're freshly pulling out of a box and talking about how shiny it is. Who cares? I just don't get that sort of thing. And so I won't do it here. So the only tools I'm going to review are stuff that I really like that I've been using for either months or years. Okay? Yeah, if you're into unboxing videos, then you have to go somewhere else. I don't know what to tell you, except that maybe we can't be friends. Sorry. So that's the tool of the week. I'll do that segment at the very end. There will be a link in the description for the tool. I am trying to set up affiliate relationships, by the way, for these links. And so sometimes when you press that link, I'll be getting commission from it. Sometimes I won't, though. I'm going to put up the link for the tool regardless of whether I get a commission from it. Okay, so we're starting out in the private members forum on Discord. So the way you get into this forum, by the way, is by purchasing one of my online courses or by signing up for one of my workshops. You get access to the forum then. So I start with these guys, and then I'll jump over to YouTube at the end and answer your questions there as well. All right, so first we have a question from Brad Rem, and actually I think you emailed me as well. And as many people find out when they email me, I am very, very slow to respond, and sometimes I just never get to it. So I'm sorry there, Brad, but it looks like, well, this is good because, you know, I often respond just to tell people, hey, people who are in the forum, post this in the forum, because there's hundreds of other builders in the forum who are going to be way quicker at answering this question than I will be. Plus, you'll get the benefit of all these different voices giving their perspective on the same thing. Looks like Brad figured that out on his own, though. And he writes, since LMI closed, I can't find a place to buy the wood to build an OM guitar. I would like to know where most of you get your wood and other parts required to build an OM. I don't like StewMac kits. Any other places to get the wood for sides, soundboards, neck blanks, fretboards, etc. And just to add some context in the email, I think he had mentioned that he was looking for more prefab kind of stuff. So he doesn't like kits, but he does want pre-bent sides and pre-slotted fretboards. And so, you know, the easiest way to get that is to get it from, say, a kit from, say, for example, Blues Creek Guitars. John Hall is about 45 minutes away from me, actually, and he runs Blues Creek Guitars, and they sell all kinds of kits. But I think what he's trying to do is still get the custom aspect of, say, what LMI used to do. They used to have the kit wizard where you could customize all your choices, but still get these services done to the wood. For example, side bending and fret slotting. So some of the answers we have here. Patrick mentions Blues Creek Guitars, as I just did right now. He also mentions eBay. That's actually a very good point. Check out eBay. And he mentions Allied Lutherie. Allied Lutherie is very good, so I second that. LC Guitars writes, soundboards, I go to alaskawoods.com. Back and sides, Hearn Hardwoods. I second Hearn Hardwoods. Just came from Hearn Hardwoods, and that's where I got a lot of the materials that I'm reselling right now, actually. Among others, for neck blanks, he says Hibden Hardwoods. I've never ordered, I don't think I've ever ordered from Hibden Hardwoods, but they're, you know, well known in the industry. Larry Kuhn writes, in addition to Alaska Specialty Woods and Hearn, some other places I've bought from include Hibden Hardwoods, again, has good deals on mahogany and cedar for necks. I haven't bought any other tonewood from them. That's interesting that both Larry and LC Guitars are singling out Hibden for their necks. So I guess they are really good. The deals are just really good on the necks specifically. That's interesting. He also writes, Pacific Rim Tonewoods has some really nice stuff. I bought one of the most beautiful sets of koa I've ever seen from them. Aaron Hicks on eBay has some nice stuff. He sells both auction and buy it now. And if you watch the auctions, you can scoop up some nice deals, but buy multiple sets at the same time if you can to divvy up the shipping cost. RC Tonewoods, yep, I've ordered from them. They're great. Has some nice stuff, but their stock varies on a given day. I haven't bought from Allied Lutherie, but I have them bookmarked. Okay, great. And so that's very helpful. Rick Malloy writes Alaska Tonewoods, Kimball Hardwoods, I've never heard of that one. Aaron Lucas Guitars, and Pacific Rim Tonewoods. Yeah, and then just reading through more of the dialogue here, you know, they figured out that, hey, you can get slotted fretboards from StewMac. They're great for that. But bent sides are, honestly, right now, it's just a hole in the market right now. I don't know where you get pre-bent sides except from prefab kits where all of your options are chosen for you. So, I mean, I hate to say it, but you're just SOL for now. I'm sure someone will pick that up. I'm not going to do it. because I'm just not set up to do that in an efficient way where the money would make sense. So yeah, I don't know. So if you're an entrepreneurial minded luthier out there, and hey, as we all sort of find out in this thing, there's not a whole lot of money to be made just building and selling guitars. This could be an option for you. Maybe you can be the person who bends sides and sells them that way. Even if that's the only service and wood material that you sell, right? You don't have to be a full-on full service shop for everything material-wise that a guitar maker needs. You could just be the bent sides guy. I think there's definitely a market for it. Okay, Doc Joe writes, this is on side bending. Hello all, I bought one of the last side bending machines from LMI and have tried using it on zebra wood. The first side I was able to get a decent bend. The second time I did crack the side at the waist. It was not completely cracked, but the wood did not have a smooth bend. I thought perhaps my sides may have been a little too thick at 90 thousandths of an inch, so I went to 80 thousandths of an inch for my second pair of bent sides for zebra wood. This one seemed to have cracks, not a smooth bend, more on the ends of the waist. Okay, so he's getting the cracks at the ends of the waist. The others seemed fine. I did notice on the second pair of bending that the sides were a little scorched. So interesting thing about, scorching sides and getting those little cracks is that I find that most beginner benders are very afraid of scorching and not afraid enough of cracking the sides, right? And so they tend to keep the temperatures down a little bit too much. You really don't need to worry about scorching that much, and even if you get just a tiny bit of scorching, it's usually superficial and can just sand off the surface. Of course, it is possible to scorch it enough that it's beyond superficial and then you've ruined the sides, but most people ruin sides not through scorching. By far, they crack them. Okay, so keep that in mind. So he writes that they were a little scorched, so I'm wondering if I'm bending the waist too slow. Yes, that's possible. These were for an OM. So let me talk about that, actually, because that's really good, too. There's some good information there. There's sort of a misconception. I think a lot of people think that you have to slowly do your bend, because that's true for bending over a hot pipe. Now, when you're bending around a hot pipe, you are slowly bringing the wood in a given area up to temperature and then bending it slightly and then kind of moving the bender over a little bit and working the adjacent area and bringing that up to temperature and bending it slightly. When you're bending on a machine, you are bringing the entire side up to temperature all at once. And so once you're within the temperature range that you want to be in, which I think of as between 260 and 300, you can just, you're ready to rock and roll. You can just go for it. Truly, you don't have to and shouldn't bend slowly. You can just bring the shoe all the way down and then pull the rollers. And it's as simple as that. So you're probably going too slow because of that misconception, which is true for hand bending, right? Not the same with machine bending. Again, the whole side gets up to temperature all at once and bam, you're just ready to go. Okay, I think, did he have more? Okay, well, that's pretty much it. He has a little bit more there, but I think that's all I wanted to say about that. So don't worry so much about scorching, and once it's at temperature, just go with it. Yeah, and Patrick here agrees with between 260 and 300. Actually, that's exactly what he wrote as well. Yeah, that's what I do. But let me say one thing about the temperature as well, is even though I go for between 260 and 300, I think that everyone kind of has their own bespoke temperature. And what I mean by that, it's not that the laws of physics are different for different people. It's the same. The temperature is a constant. It's true from person to person, but it's the way that we read the temperature is a little bit fraught, okay? It's not all that accurate. And so depending on how your setup is and the way that you are reading that temperature off of either the blanket or the wood itself, there's gonna be a little bit of variability there. So if you find that you're running into trouble at 260, well, maybe your temperature is a little bit off in one direction or another, the way that you're reading it, and so you should update your methodology to account for that. So maybe you do 240 to 280 in that range, right? You get what I'm saying there? So, or you might be 275 to 310 or something like that. That range is going to exist somewhere, and there's going to be some variability depending on how you're reading the temperature. And then, you know, a little update from Doc Joe here. He says, so I was able to bend the Zero Coat this weekend. I thought he was bending zebra wood, not Zero Coat. Oh, he was bending zebra wood as practice wood, and now he's bending Zero Coat. So this is the real deal. He says, so I was able to bend the Zero Coat this weekend. Actually, I went to my local hardwood retailer and got an excellent piece of wood that I cut and then sanded to a thickness of 75 thousandths of an inch. The few things I did was that I was a little faster with the waist bend, went to a max of 300, and also in my sandwich, I used parchment paper as well as wrapping in foil. Yes, the parchment paper helps hold the moisture in, and you, especially if you're going too slow, you're going to cook off all that moisture, and now suddenly the wood has trouble becoming pliable because it needs some moisture. So that's very good. Yeah, move fast, keep the thickness pretty low, especially if you're really worried about an expensive set of wood. I like that he brought it down to 75, because 75 is very thin. That's as thin as I feel comfortable going. But again, if I'm very worried about a set, I will go that far to give me a little extra pliability to the wood. And then, yeah, the parchment paper will help retain some of that moisture. He writes, I know some protocols have you then keep the temp on for about 10 to 15 minutes at 260 after the final bend, and then allow to cool. I went for only 5 minutes and then allowed to cool. This seemed to work for me. Yeah, this is something, you know, that I find, I don't know that it really matters. Some people do it, some people don't. It kind of depends, but sometimes I keep the temperature on, I keep it up at temperature for about, I mean, for me, honestly, like 30 seconds to a minute. And that's just to kind of let everything set. But I say that's dependent on, it's really dependent on how the bend went. Every bend goes a little bit differently. If I feel like I've been close to or at 300 the whole time during the bend, and there's a lot of steam coming off of it, I might just shut off that temperature right away because I'm getting close to scorching, right? And again, I don't know that it really needs that set time, but if I haven't been generating a lot of steam and haven't been close to 300 the whole time, I feel like it doesn't hurt to give it that extra set time, which, yes, I guess some people do 15 minutes. It seems excessive to me, but everybody sort of has their own protocol. And again, that whole bespoke thing about temperatures too sort of applies here as well. I can't say necessarily that those people are wrong, but for me, I can only tell you what works for me. And for me, it's just either setting for under a minute or not at all. All right, great. And he's got some pictures there of the finished Zero Coat set of sides, and from what I can tell from the pictures, it looks perfect. I don't see compression marks or any little micro splits or anything like that. So good job, Doc Joe. Okay, another bending question. Wow, there's a lot of these right now. Starting my second guitar, this is from Richie. The first one LMI bent the sides for me. Now I am bending on my own. What is the recommended side thickness prior to bending? So that's going to depend on the species of wood, but anywhere between 90 thousandths of an inch and 75 thousandths of an inch. I would not go lower than 75 thousandths of an inch because you were just asking for sand-throughs maybe not sand throughs, but you're asking for your sides to then be thinned out too much in the end when you do all your final sanding. I wouldn't go above 90 thousandths of an inch. Pretty much doesn't matter what species of wood you use. Almost nothing is going to bend above 90 thousandths of an inch. But with some of the easiest bending woods like rosewood and cherry, 90 thousandths of an inch is totally fine. It works beautifully. For some of the more difficult woods, I would say some of your medium difficulty woods are like Wengi we just talked about, black walnut, maple, mahogany. All of those are sort of medium difficulty. I would shoot for like 85, 80 thousandths of an inch. And then anything with figure, which is the most difficult. Doesn't matter what the species is, but with lots of figure, that's going to be 75 thousandths of an inch. Okay, the reason figure is so difficult to bend is because what you're seeing with that cool shimmering effect in figure is actually the grain alternating from straight grain to end grain. Straight grain, end grain, straight grain, end grain. And anywhere where you have that end grain, you of course, because it's so thin, you have short grain, right? So is very likely to split right at those figure locations where the grain orientation kind of dips up into end grain. Okay. Oh, and there's a whole conversation here, which seems pretty great. Let me take a look at this. Okay, yeah, so there's a lot of dialogue here in the forum, which definitely, if you want to learn more about side bending, I would check that out in the forum. Again, if you have access to the forum. I'm not going to read it all here just because it's a lot, but I like what people are saying. It's all good stuff. Okay, and then we've got some comments, not questions, some comments about joining boards and alternate jigs from a joining board for gluing your book-matched pairs together. So there's a lot of ways to do this. Patrick in the forum made a post about the jig that he uses, which is, if you've ever seen those jigs with the tapered wedges and the rope. And so essentially you have these dowels that are glued to a board, and this is going to go underneath your book-matched set. So your book-matched set sits on top of this, and then you can place these wedges on top of the book-matched set and tie rope around those dowels. And then all you have to do is push the wedges into the rope a little bit tighter, which will pull all that rope together, which is what gives you your pressure. Okay? This kind of thing is always better to see a picture of it. I'm going to throw a picture on the screen here, of course, but if you're listening in audio, that's the best I can do to describe it. Now, as an alternate, Jay Murrett in the forum posted a video by Josh House proposing a method called the tent method, he calls it. I've never seen this before, but I like it. It makes sense to me. So let me see if I can explain this. Essentially, all he's doing is placing a piece of a small batten of wood like this. Okay, not sure the exact size, underneath the seam of his two pieces to prop it up, kind of like a tent. So both of these two pieces of Wengi here are propped up at the center seam, and then he drives a bunch of nails all along the edge and along the top to sort of box it in. Of course, he's not going to drive the nails straight into his workbench like I have here. He would have a sacrificial board for this. Drives all the nails in, and then, now that he has the shape of his book-matched set, but because it's propped up by that piece of wood, that shape is going to be slightly smaller. And now if he pulls out that piece of wood and runs his glue on the edge and then presses it back in between the nails, it will push in, the nails will push in the two pieces super tight, and, you know, according to the video I just watched from him, give you a nice perfect joint. and then, you know, you just clamp it all down. He clamps it all down. I figure, I mean, you could just put weights on there and get the same thing, because of course you don't want it just buckling up from pressure. And you'll find no matter what method you use, there are simple and consistent themes across them, like giving that pressure on the sides and then putting weight down to keep it from buckling up. I still, you know, I thought this was interesting enough that I would share it with you guys, because some of you guys are low on space, and the simplicity of this I like. Especially, I would think if you're just building one guitar and you don't want to have to like build a joining board. Although I will say, a joining board is one of the easiest things to make. Here's one of my joining boards. I have several of them. It's just a piece of plywood with a batten screwed down to one end, like it's essentially like a fixed fence. And then you're just taking another piece of scrap wood and using that as your adjustable fence to make the wedge shape that you slide your two plates into. Very, very simple. But if you don't want to make that, and you maybe don't have the space for it, it doesn't take up a lot of space, but I could kind of see how maybe that would be a thing. Then this would be a good option, right? You just have your sacrificial board, and all you need is a bunch of nails. And then you can get rid of the board when you're done. So I like new methods. I like there's always pros and cons to these things. I think that's it for the Discord. Let's jump over to YouTube and do sort of like a speed round there. All right, Michael writes, great work as always. I hope your vacation was great with your little axe. This was on a video where I talked about after I was done this guitar, I was going to North Carolina, and I did, and it was great. He writes, I also live in Pennsylvania as well. Any humidity tips you can give me? I just want my guitars to last as long as possible. A couple things, yeah. So number one, if you're really worried about this, you should keep your guitars in their cases, okay? And a lot of people already know this, but I just want to start there and stress that the best way to take care of a guitar is to keep it in its case. Now, with that said, I understand why some people hang their guitars on the walls. In fact, I do that too at my home in Reading, and I even have a spot right here, it's not there right now, where a spot right here where I sometimes hang a guitar. It's kind of like my shop guitar, just something I can grab and strum a couple chords on real quick. From a musician's perspective, I understand why people want to do that, because if you keep your guitars in your cases, I've noticed this myself too, and I've heard other musicians reflect this same notion. If you keep them in your cases, you are simply, that's just a barrier to picking them up and playing them. So you're simply going to practice less and play less. So I get why, you know, that trade-off is attractive, and why you might sacrifice some of these humidity issues, right? Because your neck will get warped a little bit if you just hang it on the wall. And then, of course, you can control the humidity in that room with a dehumidifier and a humidifier. You might need the dehumidifier in the summer and the humidifier in the winter. I have both here. You can even turn them both on at the same time and have them, as long as you set them appropriately so that they're not literally battling each other, right? You don't want the humidifier to be pumping out humidity while the dehumidifier is simply sucking it right back out of the air. That's kind of like keeping your AC and your heater on at the same time to balance each other out. But if you do set it right with a buffer zone between your settings on both of your machines, it can actually be a set it and forget it thing, where your shop will then just keep itself exactly where you want it to be. Or maybe not your shop, maybe just your guitar collection room will keep it exactly where you want it to be, no matter the season. Okay? The other thing I'll say is, don't overthink this. I don't fight this as strongly as you might think I do. But one thing I do that I think is very important You know, knowledge is power here, and I have 3 of these hygrometers stationed throughout the shop so that I am very well aware, at least, of what's going on at all times. I don't hyper stress about it, so you know, right now it's a little high for what I would normally keep it in the shop, but it's nothing crazy. It's at about 50 relative humidity. I like to keep it a little bit on the dry side, around 35 for building guitars. But for a finished guitar, so for a musician, if you just have you're a collector and you have a room full of guitars, you want to keep that more at 45, okay? Maybe I don't want to get into, well, no, I will. I'll explain why, the difference really quick. So you want to keep your shop a little bit drier than you would keep your guitar showroom. And the reason for that is because most issues with guitars come from drying out, not from over humidification. And at least in North America, most places that you would take your guitar or, you know, sell your guitar to are going to be drier environments that are too dry. We don't really have rainforest here. I guess in the Pacific Northwest maybe a little bit. But the bigger issue here in North America is, you know, your guitar might travel to Tucson, Arizona, right? And then it dries out. So if you build your guitars a little bit dry at 35, then if it goes to Tucson, Arizona, where it's, I don't know, 10, it's not going to, that change is going to be less drastic, and it's not going to experience any serious drying out problems. If on the other hand you built it at 45, then that difference between 45 and 10 is much greater, and you are more likely to experience cracks and things like that, okay? And certainly if you built your guitar in an overly humid environment like 60 or 70 or something like that, then it's very easy for you to experience cracks. I hope that makes sense. I hope I didn't give you too much information and confuse you more. But yeah, so your finished guitars, go ahead and keep them at 45 with a room humidifier. Your shop, keep it at 35. Okay, that's all I got for that. Coles Relkserd writes, "Hello, I'm just a 16-year-old boy trying to fix my uncle's old guitar, and I don't really have the tool to heat the fret wire. What would the consequences be, and is it still okay to remove the fret wire without heating it?" So, yes, you can remove the fret wire without heating it. It's just heating it is the only way to prevent or drastically mitigate the problem of chip out. I guess what I'm saying is, if you just go for it, I can't tell you what's going to happen. There's a very high chance that it's going to be a hot mess of chip out. You mentioned you're a 16-year-old boy trying to fix your uncle's guitar. Let me put it this way. The fret wire, and more importantly, the brittleness of the fretboard itself, does not care that you're a 16-year-old boy trying to help your uncle out. It only cares about the temperature that it's at when the tang slides up and out of the fret wire. And I'm sorry to put it kind of bluntly there like that. I'm not picking on you by saying that. I actually think it's super cool that you're a young guy who's actually doing stuff in the world and trying to fix guitars for your uncle. That's awesome. But I still, you know, my point still stands. The board doesn't care that you don't have the tool. It's going to do whatever it's going to do. And the only way to drastically mitigate chip out is to heat a little bit, okay? Now, I will say, you don't have that tool. It's not an expensive tool, by the way. Truly, I mean, I think you can still get a solder iron for like $8. I don't know. I mean, inflation's shot everything through the roof. But it's truly not an expensive tool, so check that out first. And definitely you can find one used for, I don't know, free in a garage sale or something like that. These things are everywhere, okay? You could borrow one. It's an easy problem to solve, accessing a soldering iron. Your uncle might have one. Ask your uncle. On the other hand, you could, if you think outside the box a little bit, you could probably find a way to heat the fret wire without the soldering iron. This would be kind of risky in a way, but I think you could use a clothes iron, potentially. You'd be heating several frets at once, but I think if you're careful with the temperature and you don't scorch anything like the finish or anything like that, I think you could get away with that. Okay, I hope that helps. Again, I think it's awesome that you're doing this. Okay, Jeremy Poppin Fuss is writing a comment on a Q&A where we talked about getting side bending machine parts. That seems to be you know, a hot topic nowadays since LMI left. So he writes, it's fairly easy to get all the parts, including blankets, from Amazon. Enough people have bought parts, you can basically fill your cart with just their suggestions. I built my own for just $100. Wow. Yeah, that's great. $100 is super cheap. And I love that comment because I think he's right. I never thought of that. But absolutely, just you look for the blanket and start there, and the suggestions will fill in pretty much the rest for you. There's a at least one set of plans I know out there for building your own side bending machine, and it's how I built my 4 side bending machines back there. So it really is more doable than you think, and you might not need to spend the insane amount of money for the new StewMac side bending machine, which I think StewMac might be reconsidering their side bending machine and the price, honestly, because they did go too high on that. I don't know for sure, so don't, you know, I'm just saying I think in the future we will see an updated side bending machine that will be more attainable for the average person, which might mean that they have to cut back on certain aspects of it, right? They might have to cut some corners there. I don't know. Okay, and here we got one from Skyscraper Guitars, and he writes, I tested the StewMac benders, not terribly impressed. I don't want to spam your comments, but I am making / selling a version that is basically the next evolution of an LMI bender. I started working on it a couple years ago when I sorted out how to do cutaways on an LMI machine. I didn't move it forward out of respect for LMI, but when I found out they were closing shop, I decided to wrap up design and start production. It's under $1,000. I'm also selling the components, temp controllers, blankets, slats, rollers, etc. at a reasonable price, so if someone is going the DIY route, they can get the bits and pieces they need. By the way, your advice on the cutaway is spot on. Oh, the advice was, I was saying beginners shouldn't attempt a cutaway. You should just start with a non-cutaway guitar. It's vastly simpler. The cutaway might seem like a simple addition to your design, but there's a lot that goes into that. A lot more than you think. Okay, well that's great. I know Skyscraper Guitars sells some tools and things, so that's great to hear that they are also building a machine. I've never seen it. You know, this is not, I'm just reading this comment right now. Not an endorsement of whatever he has, but I'm definitely going to check it out later. And because like I said before about the about side bending, I mean, there really is a hole in the market here. Not just for side bending itself, but also for those machines which LMI used to sell. Okay, GJL writes on the topic of gobar rods, which we were talking about recently. He writes, I purchased 6mm fiberglass arrows online in lots of 20, cut off the flights and arrowheads, slipped on 6mm table ends, and now I have excellent rods for a fraction of the price. That sounds great. I mean, that makes total sense. They are fiberglass. If you could, I mean, I'm sure people can look this up, but I'd be interested to know the source that you used. But I guess, you know, you could probably get them from like Cabela's or anywhere that services hunters. That's a good idea, though. I never thought of that. Okay, I think that's pretty good. Let's go ahead and do the tool of the week as I promised earlier. So the tool of the week this week, oh, I forgot to do the question of the week. I've been really screwing up on the question of the week lately. So, you know what, I'm gonna go ahead and do that now real quick. I have to jump into the members forum and remind myself what it is. I like the question of the week because it's just fun to do. It really produces a lot of good dialogue. So let's do it. Okay, the question of the week this week was, and I almost forgot to read it here, is there a specific tone wood that blows your socks off? So Patrick writes, one of the things that I really enjoy is being able to work with many different exotic woods. They all have their own pluses and minuses. I read somewhere that there are 3 artists involved in every guitar: nature, the luthier, and the performer. That's a cool sentiment. I've never heard that before, and I agree. Nature, the luthier, and the performer. So he doesn't answer specifically about certain tone woods that blows his socks off, but it's kind of a broad statement in favor of variety and, you know, diversity with the woods that you use. And that's always been my kind of thing too. I try a lot of different things. Sometimes just for aesthetics, but sometimes, like we were talking about with the Wengi. Wengi's very plain looking, kind of simple looking, but man, is it a powerhouse of a tone wood. LC Guitars writes, I am in love with using Zerakote as fretboards lately. Sand's great, takes frets well, looks amazing. Yeah, it does. Tone is subjective, as I have been on an electric run. Yeah, so not much to say about tone there. I agree, Zerakote is a great fingerboard wood, Patrick says. Yeah, I've used Zerakote once or maybe even twice for fingerboard woods. Guitar number 56 has a Zerakote fingerboard. And I love it. I mean, it just looks super cool. And like he said, it does, that's always a question when you're messing with fretboard woods, is it going to take the tang well? Not every wood will do that, but it takes tangs well in my experience as well. So it works as a fretboard wood. Okay, and that's all the answers we got there. But hey, at this point, this is kind of how I always do this. I post these questions of the week in the members forum. We get some great answers and dialogue there, but now you guys on YouTube have your shot at answering these questions as well. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about tone woods and what you like and what has really kind of surprised you or just blown your socks off. So again, the question of the week is, what tone woods have blown your socks off? Okay, and so finally, let's get to the tool of the day, which is these 2 Cherries guitar brace chisels. And so the reason they're called a guitar brace chisel is simply because of the shape of the blade. You can see it has this curve here so that you can more easily and with more ergonomics get into the scoop of your tapers when you're carving your soundboard braces and your back braces. And for the longest time, I just used normal chisels for this, and you certainly can use normal chisels. If I lost these chisels, I would have no problem going back to my ordinary chisels for brace carving, but these definitely make the job a little bit more comfortable and quicker and easier. And efficiency, you know, working more comfortably and more efficiently is always a good thing. So they sell these in several different sizes. I've got 3 of them here, but I will say this middle size, the 16 millimeter, I almost never use. I really like, if I'm only getting one of these, I would get the 20 millimeter, which is their largest size, because when I'm brace carving, I like that extra width so that I can slide across the brace width as I'm slicing. I'm essentially getting a slicing cut with the wider chisel. Now, if you're going to get 2 chisels, I would recommend getting the largest one, the 20 millimeter, and the smallest, which is the 10 millimeter. I like the 10 millimeter because what I do is I will grind the bevel on the 10 millimeter to a very acute angle, 20 degrees, which is very acute for a chisel angle. And so that means that this edge is super duper keen and sharp. So I'm going to get a really good cut off of it as long as the edge lasts until it starts to crumble. Now the issue is it will, because it's so acute, there's not a lot of metal at the tip there, it's going to crumble more quickly and more easily. So what I do is I sharpen this to the acute angle, and then I use this only as like a touch-up chisel at the very end. If I use this as to do heavy work, or even worse, to use it on like hardwoods and stuff like that outside of brace carving, that edge is going to crumble almost immediately. Okay? So think of this as like your touch-up chisel if you grind a 20-degree bevel on it. Of course, you can grind whatever bevel you want and then, you know, do whatever you want with it. But I'm just saying that's what I do. So I like to have 2 of these. This one's ground at a 25-degree angle, by the way. So this chisel will last longer so that I can, you know, hog out material and do the majority of the brace carving with it. By the way, it should be stated that the smaller chisel, the reason I like to do the very acute angle with that is because it's smaller, it's less metal, less material to hone or to sharpen. So the fact that I have to sharpen this more frequently isn't a big deal because the surface area is so small. All right, so that's it. The 2 Cherries braces. There's a link in the description for Stu Max sells these. They actually have a deal going on right now for, I believe, 15% off, which is pretty good. So, yeah, I would get yourself some guitar brace chisels if you're interested. Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Just a reminder, again, I have all this Wengi. So if you want a back and side set, send me an email with your address and what you want, and I'll send you the invoice. All right, guys, have a good one. Keep on building. Thanks for watching. You guys are the best. Bye for now. If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.